Greetings, fellow thinkers and drinkers, for this part two, exploring the thesis that, based on the quality of their recorded output, can Rainbow be classified as a great band? Okay, last time we examined the debut and the Rainbow Rising. So, not surprisingly, since I regard both of them as absolutely excellent, it would appear that Rainbow's claims to greatness are still very much intact. So, let's see what happened next, shall we? Now, post-Rising, in post the touring cycle at least, in terms of personnel, Arto and Jimmy Bain, and effectively Tony Carey, in came Bob Daisley and David Stone. So this was now the band that was tasked, well, given the perhaps unenviable task of writing and recording the follow-up to Rainbow Rising, which emerged in 1978, as we all know. Long live rock and roll. Okay, what did we then get? Well, title track, I suppose one would view it as a statement of purpose, maybe a little bit defiance, I don't know. It is built on a driving mid-tempo riff, but it's grounded, it's solid, it bounces along quite nicely, it's resolute perhaps rather than flamboyant. Yet, despite its definite and undeniable anthemic qualities, it does feel a little trite to my ears. Again, I'd have to say, in hindsight, it's a clear attempt to steer the band in a more overtly commercial direction. Dio's, it delivers the lyrics with professionalism, perhaps not with his usual conviction. It never sounds entirely comfortable with it, at least not to me. Which I don't think is that surprising, because it's, in terms of lyrics, it's very sort of slogan heavy, isn't it? Long live rock and roll. It seems far removed from his usual lyrical fare. Could imagine that he, composed these lyrics with some reluctance. Yeah, it's not the album's most imaginative piece, is it? And it does it establishes a nice direct and hard tone. But for my ears, it always did this with efficiency rather than inspiration. Okay, Lady of the Lake marks a clear return to the lyrical and thematic feel of the debut and of Rising. Re-engages with myth and legends and is, reflects the more ethereal moments of the previous two albums. It's a colder effort. It's got a harder edge to it. I feel it's driven by a rigid, forceful rhythm. It gives it very much a feel of a forward march more than a sweeping journey. As much as it's not on an epic scale. Yet again, though, I have to say, Dio sounds very authoritative on this. But to me, the highlight of the song is it's the pre-chorus musical and vocal swell. It really stands out, and it does add a definite sense of drama and gravitas to the track, and it makes it very, very memorable, and it is highly, highly effective. It maybe doesn't quite achieve the transcendence of some of the band's, more notable fantasy-driven material, but it is a very, very solid effort. It's imposing in its own way and effective. And it's one of those things that does bear repeated listens. Okay, LA Connection. I think it finds this version of Rainbow at their most stripped down and, for the time, contemporary. It's a clean, streetwise rocker. It's firmly rooted in late 70s hard rock, isn't it, rather than anything legendary or mythological. And so it's a very efficient number, isn't it? It's very punchy, perhaps deliberately unambitious. Also, it's another one you could perhaps say there is that slight move towards the more mainstream, especially lyrically. cannot help wonder whether at this point Blackmore was beginning to encroach on territory that had previously belonged to Dio. Song works well enough on its own terms, however, but because of the lyrical content and the structure of the song, it does feel slightly disconnected from what's up until this point had been, let's say, the band's defining identity. I like it though. It's good. It's good. Okay, Gates of Babylon. Well, yeah, all right. One of the album's undisputed highlights, one of the band's undisputed highlights, really. It's expansive, it's dramatic, it's richly textured. It really benefits from Cozy Powell's thunderous drumming and Blackmore's exotic melodic flourishes. This time, Dio inhabits the lyric completely, delivering one of his most commanding performances. This track is just superb, isn't it? It balances weight and grandeur, and it stands, as I've said, it stands comfortably up there with your Stargazers, your Light in the Black, your Man on the Silver Mountain, etc., etc. An absolute monster. Okay, Kill the King, which is, we all know, it's fast, it's aggressive, and it's very uncompromising, isn't it? It's just pure velocity. It strips away atmosphere in favor of raw momentum, and again, this one very much powered by Cozy Powell's relentless assault and Blackmore's razor-edged riffing. Ronnie Dio sounds ferocious on this. You know, he rides the chaos with absolute control. It's not subtle, but it is exhilarating. And in retrospect, again, this is one of those examples you'd have to say the yet to develop genre of power metal. Yeah. One can see whence it came, I think, in this track. Although it must be said that the studio version never quite competes with the live performances that many listeners were already familiar with, where the song's sheer aggression and urgency were even more pronounced than they are on the record. So it's difficult once it had appeared on the on stage album and was familiar to concert goers, and you can never quite replicate that effect on vinyl, can you? And the studio version, I say, does suffer slightly from that. Okay, The Shed. Subtle. And subtle it is not. But it leans into some darker, more apprehensive mood. Maybe it is a bit subtler then. It unfolds measured but unrelenting pace, but it builds tension through sheer weight, rather than any sort of restraint. It's a balance they achieve just about to perfection on this record. Again, Dio is fantastic. He's controlled, but his vocal is ominous. And the arrangement, it favors atmosphere rather than force, and yet it is still a very forceful song. Again, one has to mention Cozy Powell on this. His drumming on this is especially brutal. And he drives the proceedings forward with a real punishing intensity. I don't think this ever really got the detention. Yeah, even the attention it deserved. For my money, it's one of the album's absolute highlights. Uncompromising, enduring. Great achievement, great song. All right, Sensitive to Light is sleeker, isn't it? It's very tightly constructed, and it's very much a vehicle for rhythm and drive, I think. It does, I suppose, if we're being honest, it does stylistically resemble If You Don't Like Rock and Roll from the debut, but this is a far stronger and much more confident composition. Yes, it is pure rock and roll. It's direct, it's unpretentious, and it's hugely enjoyable. And it does provide even a nice welcome change of mood within the album. But again, I suppose one could argue it does hint at that more streamlined direction that prioritizes precision over grandeur. But I'd have to say this succeeds very much on its own terms. It's a very purposeful song, and it doesn't sound transitional to me in that way. Rainbow Eyes closes the album, and this obviously invites comparison to Catch the Rainbow, does it not, from the debut. Now, this is not as renowned a song, and that's probably down to the fact that it was never featured live. It has perhaps a more simple, straightforward structure than does Catch the Rainbow. But one cannot deny that this song, in and of itself, is a thing of absolute beauty. It's delicate, it's intimate, emotionally very rewarding, very textural, and yes, it is given a very subdued arrangement. But again, one has to say Dio excels on this and gives one of his most tender performances. It's devoid of his customary bombast and theatrics. But it really is. It's a beautiful piece, and it's a very dignified conclusion to the album, and it remains one of the band's most quietly affecting moments. Well, that was that. Say, no easy task following up Rainbow Rising, was it? Does this album succeed? Yes. As a follow-up to Rising, I think this succeeds brilliantly. The band have refined their sound, no doubt. They've tightened the songwriting. They're not going for those, particularly for those epic songs, but the statements they're making are just as loud and just as noticeable and just as effectual, but within a shorter time frame. So yes, they have tightened up the songwriting. They've sharpened it. Perhaps it's a more focused effort, but by no means have they lost their sense of ambition. Certainly, there are plenty of examples on this album that are equally as thrilling as anything I think to be found on Rainbow Rising. And in doing so, it does prove that Rising was not a flash in the pan, does it not? That the Rainbow were, at this stage at least, capable of sustaining greatness and building something more powerful and defined. It is a natural progression from Rainbow Rising. And I have to say that the couple of weaker moments which I alluded to, maybe Long Live Rock and Roll and LA Connection, wasn't it? Yeah. I still find them stronger than the, shall we say, the lesser moments on Rising, which does make this the band's most consistent effort to date. One could play the game, could one not? If one removed, let's say, Run with the Wolf, Starstruck, and Do You Close Your Eyes from Rising and replace them with Gates of Babylon, Kill the King in the Shed. Well, there you have it. Again, so maybe on an individual basis, nothing does quite reach the heights of Stargazer, Light in the Black. But as I said, this is, and that would be debatable, very debatable. But again, as I've already said, from start to finish, this record is very, very hard to fault. Now, in terms of production, it's got a similar sound and effect to Rainbow Rising, as much as it could have been better. It's competent, it's solid, but again, we come back to the fact that Martin Birch was very hit and miss, was he not? But again, as I said, with the production on the Rainbow Rising, this album could have been better with a better production, one that resonates a little better, had perhaps slightly better separation of instrument. Yeah. It's not great. It's not bad, but it's not great. Now, in commercial terms, this did much the same type of business as did Rising, which means it did respectably well in Europe and Japan, but was, in essence, largely ignored in the United States. On the personnel front, a recurring theme with this band, isn't it? But post the touring cycle, Bob Daisley and David Stone found themselves surplus to requirements. And Dio also departed, but more one thinks of his own volition. As Blackmore had, again, after the touring cycle at least, had decided that the Rainbow needed to go into a more mainstream and commercial direction, which was at odds with Dio's vision and did not reflect the music he wanted to make. So off he went. Sadly, however, and I hate to end on a sour note because I am very enthusiastic about this, but facts are what they are. This would be the last album where Rainbow truly operated as a strong creative force, forging material in their own distinctive and creative idiom. From this point on, they would increasingly fall into the role of followers rather than pioneers, and they would spend much of the remainder of their career very much in the shadow of others. As I've just alluded to, I think frustrated by the lack of commercial success, Blackmore made the decision that the band were going to change. He had his eye on hit singles, on radio airplay, and that, I think, very much became his priority, which perforce means writing different type of music. This is from now on. The band are going to be very much focused on mainstream appeal, and to this end, they recruited singer Graham Bonnet. Roger Glover also joined the band, initially as producer, but he soon assumed bass duties as well, and keyboardist Don Airey was furthermore recruited to the cause. Okay, so this was a band that decamped to France to record the band's next album. One was very much intended, and I think this is no secret, to develop Blackmore's new vision, which resulted in 1979's Down to Earth, which opens with All Night Long. And this is a dramatic change, and it's an unmistakable shift towards mainstream pop rock, is it not? All Night Long is at its best an average up-tempo rock number. Well, mid to up-tempo rock number. It's built on a very basic construction. There's a jaunty beat to it, fair enough, I suppose, but it has an aggressively radio-friendly sheen to about it. The lyrics, frankly, are utterly banal, and they offer nothing beyond empty platitudes, do they? Although one has to say that Graham Bonnet's vocal performance is undeniably strong, and he does carry it off with what appears to me, at least, to be complete conviction. Great singer, well, he is. He's worlds away from Dio, but that was very much the point, was it not? Even this far into the album, this is the first song. The contrast with the band's earlier work is stark. It really is. And this is obviously a calculated bid for accessibility, or to achieve accessibility, rather than artistic expression. And sometimes it even recalls Kiss at their sort of mid-70s commercial peak, doesn't it? This type of song, this type of arrangement. And that is not a compliment. I'm not here necessarily to diss on Kiss. Apologies. But they did what they did. Did it pretty well. And Rainbow were doing what they were doing it very well. But it's one of those situations that never the twain shall meet. It becomes very uncomfortable talking about both of them in the same sentence. Okay, the second track, Eyes of the World, is easily one of the album's strongest moments. It's where the band still manages to marry that sort of, shall we say, mainstream appeal with actually real power, conviction, and substance. The riff is sharp. The chorus has its hooks without sounding contrived. And even within this, and as I'll say, this is one of the few tracks that you could have imagined on, say, Long Live Rock and Roll, but even without, Graham Bonnet does sound genuinely confident and comfortable. And for once, the lyrics are much less cliched and contrived. And Blackmore's back to his best, especially on the solo, which is really quite magnificent. It is perhaps one of the few tracks on offer here that retains a sense of drama and weight, even as the band are obviously moving towards a more contemporary sound. And it's perhaps the only time where one feels that they have created something that is genuinely worthwhile. Yes, as I said, one could have imagined it on Long Live Rock and Roll, and that, on this occasion, is a compliment. All right, No Time to Lose up next. A reasonably brisk, efficient hard rock number, is it not? But it is also easily one of the album's most forgettable tracks. It's built around a basic, functional, formulaic structure, standard hard rock beat, which rarely rises above competence. It's reasonably energetic, yes, but it lacks total imagination, I have to say, and it's got no emotional pull to it whatsoever. Nothing at all to make it memorable. And I'm afraid this is a very clear example of this album's tendency towards innocuous filler. Speaking of which, Making Love, God, these titles are just getting worse, aren't they? It's one of the smoother tracks on offer. It's attempting a groove, well, as much as a groove as one will achieve with Cozy Powell on the drums, that is, but definite signs of polish, radio-friendly commercial polish on this one. Although, having said that, I do think the riff it's based on it is rather engaging, though I do have a sneaking suspicion it's not the last time we would hear this riff. Just trying to think what it reminds me of. What comes to mind is the riff to Strange Ways on Deep Purple's House of Blue Light album, but I'd need to check that. But I'm convinced one will hear this riff again. And not for the last time I'll be making that comment. But okay, on the positive side, I suppose the rhythm is clean, the guitars are tight, and again, we'll say Graham Barnett's vocal delivery is confident and assured, fits the song. And yes, its mainstream intent is more than obvious, and again, the lyrics are incredibly generic, not at all compelling. It is pleasant enough. It's never a compliment, that, is it? But I have to say, it is, apart from the riff, the rest of the track quickly fades from memory. All right, Since You've Been Gone, the album's most famous song, and the clearest sign of Rainbow's new direction, I would have to say. Now, written by Russ Ballard, as we all know, and this does mark the first time that the band have decided to turn to an outside songwriter. Something that's a rather telling decision in itself, is it not? Okay, it's a model pop rock song. It has efficiency, it's concise, it's impeccably structured, engineered for instant recall. It's instantly memorable. You can't deny it. And again, Bonnet delivers a strong, clean vocal, and the song is undeniably catchy, yes. I mean, to the extent that it has subsequently gone on, to feature in every jukebox, just about in every bar on the planet, has it not? Yet if you strip away this ubiquity, what remains is rather lame. It's a hollow piece of pop, and it's utterly divorced from the band's earlier identity. It's polished, it's calculated. Yes, it's successful in its own terms, but it achieves that success by abandoning the band's former sense of scale, majesty, ambition. It's a pop song. Okay, Love's No Friend slows things down a little bit, and it's a bit of a heavy trudge, I would have to say. And it's another one, unfortunately, it promises much more than it delivers. It's built on a dour, grinding riff, which could have gone somewhere, certainly. But in this case, the song never really develops beyond its initial idea. Pacing is leaden, momentum minimal. The chorus, which should provide release, is noticeably weak and very underwhelming. It is slightly darker in tone, which does offer some respite, shall we say. Certainly compared, this is not Black Sabbath, but certainly compared to the surrounding material, shall we say. But ultimately it's inert, or it feels inert. It's a track that goes through the motions, but it never finds a compelling destination. It really doesn't. Okay, Danger Zone is a bit faster. It's sharp, and it is driven at least by some momentum, which is pleasant, or a pleasant change. But again, it lacks any real distinction or distinctive qualities to it. It's competent, it's energetic, but it's template hard rock, and it offers really little to nothing beyond that. It's a standard filler track. It really is. Well, having said that, it might. I mean, that's it's not on its own here, is it? It might just be a little better than a couple of the others, maybe. Okay, Lost in Hollywood. Well, at last, some balls. It finally injects some drive and energy into the proceedings, does it not? Which is a welcome change on an album that has played it far, far too safe. Yes, it's an obvious structural and musical lift from A Light in the Black. No denying that one. But at least it understands the value of momentum and some tension, musical tension within it. And it surges, it doesn't plod. And again, Graham Bonnet sounds really good, really engaged on this song. Lyrically, well, not the worst offender on the album. Very predictable. Much less imaginative than anything Dio was providing us with. But even having said that, it is one of the album's better moments, along with Eyes of the World. It's flawed, it's derivative, but yet I have to say it is at least alive. Now, the Sessions produced a couple of other songs. The first one, Bad Girl, wasn't it? Which stylistically is very much in keeping with the majority of the rest of the album. And in truth, it would have been, had they included it, no, let me put that differently. It would have been largely interchangeable with the majority of the tracks on the album. And had they done that, it would neither have enhanced nor detracted from the overall result. Maybe that is a little harsh. Maybe it is slightly better than a couple of them, but not by much. Weisheim, on the other hand, is a superb, sublime instrumental piece. It really is exquisite. It's got restrained poise, incredibly melodic, incredibly moving, if somber. And yeah, I mean, yes, the album would have benefited from this having been included on it, I think, and it very much demonstrates what Blackmore was still capable of when he had a mind to do so. But since neither were included on the album, I'm afraid they don't count. Okay, Roger Glover's production it's clean, it's efficient, resolutely commercial. It prioritizes clarity and radio impact over anything resembling depth, substance, resonance, atmosphere. It sounds polished, it's professional, it lacks weight. As I said, space and resonance. It's fairly nondescript production, I have to say. Not too much to recommend it. Not the worst one I've ever heard, but there's not too much to recommend it. And then I'm afraid with that. Now, in terms of the, looking at this as the next album in the band's career, well, what can I say? I mean, compared to the grandiose pomp and majesty of the Dio-era, this sounds more like a second-rate Free or Bad Company, I'm afraid. Perhaps even the Scorpions, who at the time I think were going through a similar musical transition into the more commercial mainstream. It could also, as I alluded to earlier, some of the songs do, you almost imagine them on Kiss, circa Rock and Roll Over or something like that, but, you expect better from Blackmore, don't you? And just too many of the songs on here are just not as lively or even engaging as some of those, pop rockers on Kiss or Rock and Roll Over. And the truth, I'm afraid, is inescapable. The drop in quality from the Dio era to this is stark and unmistakable. It has to be said. Now, many bands have streamlined their sound without sacrificing, quality or credibility. I will always cite Rush as being an obvious example of this. However, here, this is a deeply, deeply disappointing effort. It's a calculated attempt to court mainstream pop rock market, and I'm sorry, but it largely fails on its own terms. Why? Because the songwriting is just inferior. I know some commentators rate this album very highly, and so be it. Vive la différence. No problem with that, but I simply do not and cannot hear it that way. It's just very, very nondescript. Okay, in terms of the band, after 5 years of working with Ritchie Blackmore, which one thinks in hindsight, should deserve some sort of accreditation. I wouldn't go as far to say that a Nobel Prize or something like that, but I think one gets the point. And with the band becoming increasingly commercial, it was enough to decide, for Cozy Powell to decide to jump ship, which he did after the subsequent tour. Not long after that, he was followed by Bonnet, who departed amid, let's say, creative differences with Blackmore. Not the least of which being the length of his hair. Now, commercially, this did go some way toward achieving Blackmore's stated aim of achieving mainstream success, perhaps largely driven by the hit singles, Since You've Been Gone and All Night Long. Again, the album performed well in Europe and Japan, but for the first time, it charted in the United States, reaching number 66, though it did not certify in the US, a point we will return to again. Now, while this, I guess that from Blackmore's point of view now, while this was obviously an encouraging trend, the album hardly set the world alight, did it, in terms of sales. And with Powell and Bonnet gone, Blackmore was left not only searching for a replacement singer and drummer, but probably also wondering what the next step would be. Do I turn left or do I turn right in terms of musical direction? Well, that was that. Okay, back to my thesis. How do these two albums rate? And are we able to say that based on, on the band's recorded output, are Rainbow a great band? Well, Long Live Rock and Roll is to me an absolutely fantastic record. I've already discussed that. So if we're keeping account, there's now 3 out of 8, which I would say are great albums. However, Down to Earth provides the first real and incontrovertible evidence in support of my thesis that based on their recorded output, they are not a great band. As I've already mentioned, the drop-off in quality here is abrupt and very, very noticeable. In places, it is hard to reconcile the fact that this still is the same band. It is only some genuinely wonderful touches by Blackmore. But, even they're getting fewer and farther between, shall we say. But it's just that that keeps, say, the spirit of Rainbow, the flame of Rainbow as it was, burning. Although not quite down to the embers yet, but the fire needs stoking. And you just simply cannot compare Down to Earth to what came before. As I previously stated, Long Live Rock and Roll would prove to be the last time the band appeared intent on creating original and compelling and challenging music. A lot of people have said that Down to Earth is a transitional album, and yes, it is a transitional album, but perhaps not necessarily in the way that's commonly understood. It is the move towards the more commercial aspect, certainly, but it is the transition down to very, very inferior songwriting. So yes, it's a transitional album, is it not? And yes, again, as I've already mentioned, from now on, the band would become trend chasers rather than trendsetters. Perhaps they would also become also-rans, but let's not get ahead of ourselves, shall we? There are still another 4 albums to go, and I won't spoil the surprise. But you're going to have to wait till next time, when we pick up this story again and see how it develops. What do you think? I'm sure not everyone will be in agreement with me on this one, but fair enough. Feel free to like, to subscribe, to share, and obviously to comment. And until next time, I thank you for your indulgence. I wish you well, and Maçhonquèrre.